Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Griffin and I am a filmmaker based out of Orange County, California. And today we're going to talk about the Canon C500 Mark II. So last week I was able to take out the Canon C500 Mark II on a job. It was a commercial job that we were shooting. It was for the company I work with called Fight Camp, and it was for a home boxing commercial. And we got to rent some really cool lenses. We got to rent the Kowa Anamorphic lenses, and that was one of the things that I was really excited about. We actually had an Alexa Mini on rental before we locked in the project, and then when I found out that the rental house was getting the C500 Mark II in, I ended up switching because I really wanted to try this camera out for myself and see if this was going to be a good camera for me to purchase. So I wanted to test it out in the real world and not just look at the spec sheets and watch everybody's side-by-side comparisons. I wanted to kind of see how it really performs. So I was lucky enough to be able to do that. And let me just tell you, I really like this camera a lot. So the format for this review is I'm going to talk about the things that I liked, the things I didn't like so much, and just kind of my overall thoughts at the end. So jumping right into it with the things that I really liked about the camera. First thing is it's a full frame camera. This type of look is really great. It's just, I started with the DSLRs and always loved the full frame look, and jumping into a cinema camera, it's obviously a Super 35 sensor most of the time. So the camera I shoot on the majority of the time is the Canon C200. It's a Super 35 sensor. I've really gotten used to that, and I've kind of forgotten how much I really like the full frame look. And shooting on the C500 Mark II, it really just reminded me of why I fell in love with that look in the first place. It's really just got a great way of separating your subject from the background, and it really just has a nice polished professional look. The second thing I really like about the camera is it's got the ability to shoot in anamorphic. This is something that isn't available on, I don't think, any other Canon cinema camera except the C700, and pretty much like nobody's shooting on those cameras because they're as expensive as the Alexas, and it seems like the industry really just favors the Alexas over those. So the fact that this camera is about a third of the price of an Alexa Mini, or even maybe a quarter, it's pretty cool that you can shoot anamorphic and have a somewhat comparable image to that. If you compare it with a nice set of lenses, like the lenses we used to the project were the Kowa Anamorphic, the Kowa Pro Monars, and these lenses are sweet. They've really just got an awesome look to them, awesome flare, and it's just got a really unique look that you're just not going to find anywhere else. And actually, to my surprise, we shot in full frame anamorphic, and we were actually didn't have any vignetting except for when we used the 40mm. So that was really cool to be able to have that extra separation and depth of field that you're getting with the bigger sensor. So the third thing I really liked about the camera are all the codec options. You get C-Log 2, which is the one with the most dynamic range and the one that I always prefer to shoot in. It's available in everything from 2K to 5.9K. And that's really awesome because some projects you kind of just, you want to have a nice look, and everyone can always appreciate a good look, but if you know maybe it's just going to web delivery and no one's ever really going to be streaming it in 4K, you can go ahead and shoot it in 2K and actually have a really nice image, and it's still 10-bit 422. So you'll be able to color grade it just like you normally would with any of your high-end stuff, and it's not going to fall apart. You know, and then like I mentioned earlier, it's got the 4K 10-bit 422 in the XFAVC, and then it's also got the 5.9K RAW. So that's if like you're shooting something real high-end and you don't mind taking your time on the edit, you don't mind doing a proxy workflow for that. It's a really awesome codec, super high-end, crazy high bit rates though. I mean, that one was having, it wouldn't play back at all on my iMac Pro. So, I mean, if you have that, just know that you need to be editing proxies with that workflow because you're really just not going to be able to edit that natively. Okay, so the fourth thing I loved about this camera that was actually a total surprise for me was the in-body stabilization. I could not believe that it worked so well. I saw some kind of mixed reviews online, so I really was kind of just writing that off. I actually didn't even use it. I had the camera 2 days. The first day I was shooting the commercial the whole time, and so I just wanted to stick with what I knew was going to work, and I didn't want to mess around with the stabilization. And on top of that, the look we were going for was kind of more that gritty handheld look to give a lot of energy to the shots. So we didn't really want the extra stabilization. The second day I had it, I was just doing a lot of camera tests. So I just kind of went out to the parking lot and just flicked on the stabilization. The lens I was shooting on was the Canon 24-70 2.8 version 2. This is a lens that I love. It's got a really good image, really good focal length, but it does not have image stabilization. So I find myself favoring the 24 to 105 just because it's got that image stabilization, and it's kind of it's a little too shaky for most of the stuff if you're in like a run and gun situation. So when I put the stabilization on that 24 to 70, I couldn't believe how smooth it was. It basically made it almost look like it was on a tripod, which was really crazy. So that was pretty cool. And then I also did some shots walking, and I didn't have the camera all that long, so I couldn't do that much with it, but I just did some tracking shots walking behind a subject. It was actually my fiance, and we were just kind of walking along having a fun time, and I just wanted to see how much it would smooth out the shots. I was super impressed. There was a tiny bit where it got a little bit jumpy, but I mean, in my opinion, it takes the footage from basically being completely unusable to usable, and it kind of opens up a lot more possibilities to use different lenses like the 24 to 70 that doesn't have IS. I'd say that's a huge win, and I'm really happy that it's in this camera. So the fifth thing that impressed me about this camera was the high ISO performance. This camera really surprised me. It did really, really well, and it kind of blew me away. I mean, I was shooting at some super high ISOs, like all the way up to 12,800 ISO, and there wasn't too much noise in the shot. I would feel completely fine using this for almost everything that I'd be shooting. Especially in the XF-AVC, there's definitely some noise reduction built into it, and it kind of cleans the shots right up. The RAW was a little bit noisier than the XF-AVC for sure, but it still looked pretty good, and it seems like Canon has definitely done some work to clean up those shadows. And anybody that shoots in C-Log 2 knows that if you kind of underexpose the shots and you have to push the shadows up, that you'll see typically a lot of noise, and I really didn't find that to be the case with this camera. Compared to my Canon C200, it was quite a bit cleaner. I'm actually planning to do a video where I do like an in-depth comparison against the C200 in a lot of different situations. So if you're into that kind of stuff, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button and checking it out. I should be posting that up next week. All right, so the sixth thing I liked about this camera was the fact that you can kind of strip it down, so it's just like the normal C200 form factor, or if you're doing more of a commercial gig and you're totally comfortable having a big camera and you have an easy rig and you want to impress your clients on set, that's really nice that it's got that expansion module and it's like natively built in, and in about a minute and a half you can add that thing on, go straight to a V-mount situation with the batteries, and it's really cool. It actually adds 2 extra XLRs. We didn't use that for what I was using it for, but I could see that definitely coming in handy if you need it. And it's definitely just had a good feel to it. It feels like a really big camera, kind of similar in weight to like an Alexa Mini when it's in that larger form factor. But then when you don't need it and you want kind of a smaller form factor, you can kind of strip that thing down, and it really feels super close in weight and size to the C200. Another thing that's cool about the form factor is you can switch between EF and PL mount, and that's user interchangeable. So with the Canon C200, that's something that you kind of you're supposed to send to Canon. I've got some friends that have done it themselves, but I actually never really felt comfortable doing that. And on top of that, for myself, probably 80 to 90% of my projects, I'm just using the EF glass that I already own, and it works great. But for projects that you want something a little nicer and you've got the budget to rent some good lenses, it's really cool that you can just swap that PL mount and you can really put some high-end cinema glass and get a really nice look. So another thing I like about the camera is it's got dual card slots, and it also has proxy recording when you're shooting in the RAW mode. So it's really good. I mean, a lot of stuff that you might be shooting, say like if it's like a high-end wedding, I mean, it's got to be a pretty nice wedding if you're shooting on a C500 Mark II, but anything where you can't afford to lose the footage, maybe it's like a documentary and you really can't miss the footage, and if you have a card failure, it'd be huge and catastrophic for you. It's nice knowing that you kind of have the peace of mind that you have a second card slot that's recording the exact same footage at the full bit rate. And then when you are shooting in that RAW mode, it's really nice that it's got that proxy recording, because those files are like pretty much impossible to edit unless maybe you have like one of the new Mac Pros. But if you have the proxy recording, you can do an online offline workflow, and that's going to really speed things up for you. Another thing I liked about the C500 Mark II is it can send 4K 10-bit 422 signal externally. So if you wanted to record on something like Ninja 5 or any of the Atomos recorders, they would be able to capture that all the way up to 4K 60. So that's pretty cool, and then that's going to give you a nice ProRes file. I did find the XF-AVC files pretty easy to edit. Not quite as good as ProRes, but it's definitely a lot easier to edit than the RAW footage. So that's a big win for sure. Okay, so another thing I liked about the camera is it uses this new CF Express media. Kind of sucks you got to buy the media all again, especially when the CFast media that a lot of us already bought was so expensive. But it's kind of the way of the future, and it's super fast. When I was transferring it to my computer, it was significantly faster, and it helped when we were dumping all the media on site at the shoot. So that's really cool, especially as the file sizes are getting bigger, media is getting faster. It's nice that they adopted this all in, and you can know that if you're buying this or maybe a B cam like the 1DX Mark III. So I pre-ordered that one too. So that's going to be nice that I'll be able to switch all the way over to the CF Express and just have pretty much one type of media that I know I have to carry with me all the time. So the last two things I liked about the camera were the monitoring situation. So the actual monitor itself, it's a little bigger than what I was used to coming from a Canon C200. And I feel like it kind of falls right in that sweet spot where I could actually get away with just using this monitor. And with my C200, I feel like I always sort of have to have an external monitor so I can really see my image properly and make sure things are in focus. And also the overlays from the C200, they really go right over your image. So you end up like where you can't really see a lot of the image is blocked off by all those little overlays unless you turn the displays all the way off, and then you can't see anything. So one new mode they have that's available with the C500 Mark II is this mode where it pushes all the information out to the sides, but you still get a clean looking image. There's no overlays on top of your image. And that's really nice where you can still see your settings and make sure everything's recording and your frame rate's right and your ISO is not too crazy or anything like that. And your audio levels aren't peaking, but you can also see your image without having any distractions. Okay, so jumping into the things that I really didn't like so much about the camera, the first thing would have to be the 120 frames per second. The actual image doesn't look so bad, to be honest, but the fact that it's only 2K, it doesn't have autofocus, it doesn't have sound, and it's a Super 16 crop. I mean, it was kind of a bummer. So if you're someone you really just need a high-speed camera and you need this thing to be your main workhorse, this is probably not going to be it. I mean, you might be better off with something like, say, a Red or even like an Ursa Mini Pro G2. I mean, even that thing I think does a lot higher frame rates and it's not cropping into the sensor as much. So even the C200's got a Super 35 crop at 120 frames per second. And the fact that it crops even more into the sensor, I mean, it's at a higher bit rate, it's 10-bit 422, and they also have the RAW available, but it definitely is a letdown if that's something that you really need in the camera. So the second thing I don't really like about this camera is the fact that there are not different compression ratios available for the RAW. The RAW is like insanely massive file sizes. If you're shooting on something like a Red or a Blackmagic, there's different compression ratios you can do. So if you don't need this insane quality, you don't have to shoot at the highest quality version. You could drop it down to like 8:1 or 12:1, and you can kind of save on your file sizes. And also the Cinema Raw Lite, it really gives a hard time to pretty much every computer that I've ever tried to play it back on. And that's even in the 4K crop mode. It still has a pretty tough time. So a lot of times like I've mentioned before, I just transcode to ProRes, or with this camera, if I do end up purchasing it, I'll probably wind up shooting in the XF AVC quite a bit more than the Cinema Raw Lite. So the third thing I didn't really like about this camera was there's no longer a place on the body that you can attach a shotgun mic. That was something I really always liked about the C200. You can kind of make it a little more compact. I don't really like the stock Canon handle that holds the monitor and the mic, so I prefer something a little bit smaller than that. And they got replaced by some weird little like micro USB thing. I don't even know what that's for, but I'm hoping that some third-party manufacturers come out with something to mount that on the body so you don't have to use the stock Canon handle to hold the mic. Okay, so the fourth thing that was a little bit of a letdown with this camera was it's not weather sealed like the C300 Mark II. The C200 is not weather sealed, and that was always something that I really thought was cool about the C300 Mark II, because I filmed in some places like Iceland where you're just getting totally blasted by like waterfalls and your camera is like soaking wet by the time you're done filming, or if I'm traveling and you're out and water is splashing from the ocean. It's really nice to kind of have that extra peace of mind. I mean, you never want to like fully submerge your camera in water or anything like that, but if you're out shooting in the elements, you don't really have to worry about putting a rain cover on. So I ended up buying a rain cover for my C200, but it doesn't seem like they carried that over from the C300 Mark II. So for a lot of the documentary filmmakers, that probably would be something to consider. If you're filming in really harsh environments, you may still want to get the C300 Mark II. That might be a better fit for you, depending on the situation you're going to be in. Okay, another thing I didn't really like about the camera was the SNF mode, the slow and fast mode. For some reason, if you hit the SNF button, I thought it was really cool, like right on the body, and I was kind of hoping they'd have like the ability to just press one button and it switches you to slow motion, and then you press one button again and it quicks you back to 24. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. It will do that, but you kind of lose out on some functionality. You lose out on autofocus and you lose out on sound. I don't really know why that is. And then if you wanted to jump from the, like say 4K 24 and then hit the SNF button and go straight to the 2K 120, you would have to go in and change it in the menus to the Super 16 crop mode, then press the SNF button, and then it would take you to 120. And then when you want to switch back to 4K full frame, you would need to go back and switch the sensor mode to full frame. And then, I mean, you can already see where I'm going with this. That's way too many steps. So I kind of find that almost useless. Another functionality that I thought was quite a bit better than that was even coming from like the Canon DSLRs. They have the custom shooting modes, like custom mode 1, custom mode 2, custom mode 3, and you could program those to whatever you want. So if you wanted to just press like C1 would be like your 4K 24, C2 is your 4K 60, C3 is your 2K 120. It's a really quick workflow. All you need to do is press like 2 buttons and you're there. Whereas with the SNF mode that is available on the C500 Mark II, it's a lot clunkier and slower. And if you do want that one-touch functionality, you lose that on autofocus and sound. So it's kind of a letdown there. The last thing, I was debating on whether or not to put this in, but on the larger module, I forget the name of it, but the one that has the V-mount, it only has one D-tap out, and typically for most production camera settings, you're gonna need more than one D-tap. You'll probably need one for like a CODEC, one for your monitor, and then you'll need another one for say like a focus motor. So usually your battery's got one, and then the camera would have the other two. So I'm hoping that some third parties come out and make some smaller units that have 2 D-taps available and can maybe take some of those new mini V-mounts instead of the full-size ones and have like more of a mid-range package where it's not the full size like the production module, but it's a little bigger than kind of the stock build that comes with it. Okay, a couple small quirks that I found when using the camera. The first one is the HDMI out and then the SDI monitor out don't work at the same time. It's one or the other. So we were trying to run, I think we were trying to run our CODEC off the monitor out, and then we were trying to run the Ninja 5 off the HDMI out, and then we kind of realized after playing around with it that it's only one or the other. There is a SDI out, and then you get a second option that would be either SDI or HDMI. But just know that if you're trying to plan your rig in your head, maybe you're going to rent it or something like that, you should know that ahead of time. Second thing that I found is there's this weird little quirk. I'm sure it's firmware fixable, but I had a half battery left on a BPA 30, and then the camera was still saying like 3 minutes battery life left. So I'm sure they'll probably fix that in the firmware, but just something to note. Okay, so closing thoughts. I think this camera is amazing for commercial work. I think it's amazing for documentary work especially. And if you want something that is like sub $20,000, that can shoot amazing anamorphic looking images, amazing full frame images, has a lot of extra nice features like XLRs, built-in audio, it's got in-body image stabilization in a nice compact cinema camera package, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better camera. So for all those reasons, I'm super interested in actually getting this camera for myself. I am probably going to run it one more time and try it out and see. Compared against the competition, they've got like the FX9, Red Raven is available. FX9 is kind of an interesting camera, but I would say even though it's cheaper, I'd say it is missing out on a lot of the functionalities, like the RAW being built in, not necessarily needing an extra module. C500 Mark II definitely has the win in the form factor. You can even fit this thing on a Ronin S, believe it or not. So I mean, I like the fact that you have a little smaller package, and then if you want the bigger package, you can add the extra module on. That's pretty huge for me. And then just the fact that it's shooting RAW internally and it's shooting in 5.9K, not 4K. Seems like the industry is really making a big push for higher resolution. So even though I don't think we really need that right now, it's something to be aware of as you go in the next couple of years and you make a big investment over 10 grand, I mean closer to 20, you're probably going to want to make sure that thing's going to last you at least 5 years. So that's something to consider if you are thinking okay, do I want the C500 Mark II or do I want the FX9? And then to compare it to a Red Raven, I just shot on one of those for a project, and in my opinion, it's just not even a comparison. I hated shooting on the Red Raven. There's so many things I didn't like about it. The startup time was super slow. The image was fine. I think it was good, and we had nice Zeiss glass on there, but I didn't think it was anything special. And just you're missing out on so much functionality, like built-in high-quality audio, built-in XLRs, the ability to kind of build it up or strip it down. The one and only thing that I think the Red has is people, when they hear Red, they're like, whoa, like you shoot on Red, that's cool. And like, you know, you just need to see if that's really worth it for you. For me, it's definitely not. I think I can impress my clients just fine without a Red, but I wouldn't even really say it's a comparison in my mind between like a Red Raven. I mean, maybe some of the higher end stuff is a little better, but I haven't shot on it myself, so I wouldn't know. But I was not impressed at all by the Red Ravens. So in conclusion, I think this camera is really, really cool, super exciting. The image is great out of it. The fact that you can pair it with some nice anamorphic glass or full frame glass, and you can get a really nice looking package. If you're a C200 owner, you're gonna love this camera. It's basically everything that you've ever wanted out of a C200, plus a little bit more. So for me, I'm really excited about it. It's definitely a lot of money though, so I'm gonna probably rent the camera at least one more time and see if that's something that I wanna do. So I do have a video coming up next week with the Canon C200 versus the C500 Mark II. And I really just kind of put the camera side by side and ran them through a whole bunch of tests. So if that's something that you're interested in, kind of keep an eye out for that one. Should be next week. And again, I'm just kind of trying to make some of these videos. I like watching these kind of videos and figured maybe you guys would like them too. And if you watched this far, so seriously, thank you for watching the whole thing. I know this was a long one. And maybe consider hitting that subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.